Hello, and welcome to this 45-minute webinar for charities on the COVID-19 pandemic and fraud, what to watch out for and how to stay safe. This webinar has been produced by the Fraud Advisory Panel and the Charity Commission and is supported by the Small Charities Coalition, the FSI, CIPFA, Charity Finance Group and Get Safe Online. During these uncertain times, the work of charities is as crucial as ever to support our communities and the people living within them. But since the outbreak, we have seen a rise in fraud related to the pandemic as criminals seek to exploit the situation. So today, we are highlighting some of the common ways that charities may be affected by fraud during the COVID-19 pandemic. We have three guest speakers, Ian Brosnan from the City of London Police, Laura Hoff from CIPFA, and Alan Bryce from the Charity Commission, who will show you some examples of fake email, highlight some of the key financial risks associated with a remote workforce and how to overcome them, and explain how and when to report fraud in the event that either you or your charity become a victim. Finally, we will also signpost you to some free resources that you can access to protect your charity from fraud and cybercrime. Because the methods used by fraudsters will continue to evolve as we move through and out of this pandemic, we encourage you to access these resources regularly to keep up to date on the latest trends and prevention advice. Please note, we will not be taking live questions today, and this webinar will not cover fundraising fraud. Our first guest speaker is Ian Brosnan from the City of London Police, which acts as the national lead force for fraud. He will provide an update on the latest phishing emails affecting charities. Ian, over to you.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for inviting me to talk to you today. My name's Ian Brosnan. I'm a police officer at the City of London Police. I'm on the cybercrime unit, and I'm on the cyber griffin team. I do apologise, but I'm going to have to show you a legal disclaimer first, just to show that everything we say is purely just advice. So again, I do apologise for that. So today I'm going to be talking to you about phishing. Phishing is the biggest attack vector out there at the moment, and it accounts for the vast majority of attacks that are happening. But before I talk about phishing, I do have to talk about social engineering, which is a tool that the criminals use to trick people. We need to think about what information we are putting out there on social media and who actually we are sharing it with, so that we don't put out too much so that the criminals can build a picture of us and around us. But first, I want to give you a couple of stats on what the issue is out there at the moment. As I've already said, phishing is the biggest problem, and 91% of all cybercrime starts with an email, hence the reason I'm here today. And secondly, you're 4 times more likely to fall victim whilst using your mobile phone or device. And there's 2 main reasons for this. The first one is that when we're on a mobile phone or device, we tend not to pay as much attention to what we're looking at for various reasons, such as family, other distractions such as the TV, or whether we're travelling. And the second reason is that on a mobile phone or a tablet, the screen tends to be not as big as, say, a laptop, and tends to be not as much information on there. So we don't see the full picture of what's going on. So phishing, it generally falls into three main target areas. The one we're going to focus on today is spear phishing, but the one on the left is mass phishing. Now, this is the sort of email that we've all had in the past, where they send out an email that's generally got grammatical errors, and we generally know that it's a scam. But all it takes is a very, very small proportion of people to click on it, and they have their target audience. On the right-hand side, we have whaling. This is generally focused at someone who has access to high-value information or finances, such as a CEO or someone in HR that has access to personal information. So what we're going to look at now is how they actually craft a spear phishing email. So first of all, they will impersonate someone. In this instance, they're impersonating Robin Miller, who is the Chief Financial Officer of this company. Next, they will target you. In this instance, they are targeting Catherine Smith, and having probably done a little bit of research, they know that she shortens her name to Cat. Next, they will either try and lure you into something, i.e. Giving you a rebate or some sort of financial incentive. Next, it'll either be a threat, so it may come from an organisation of authority, such as the police or the HMRC. And lastly, as in this instance, they'll try and put you under some sort of time pressure to get you to do something. And next, they will try and get you to download this payload. In this instance, it's the supplier invoice, and they're trying to get you to click on that, and that is where the malware sits. Or they'll get you to go to a fake website and get you to put in information. So how can we spot these phishing emails? Very importantly, let's check the full email address. Is it genuine? Were you expecting this email? Is this come completely out of the blue from someone that you normally work with? And with regards to this email, is this a request that is normal, or is it completely out of the ordinary? And has this person ever asked of this from you before? Next, we get you to hover the link. Click on the link, but if you hover the link, it will show you the true destination of that link. And being a police officer, obviously I'm suspicious by nature, but what we try and instill is to say, accept nothing, believe no one, and confirm everything. And this is very important when it comes to emails. So what we're saying is, please take that extra 5 seconds to think, is this email genuine? So what I'm going to show you, what we have here now, is some of the current phishing emails that are out there at the moment, playing on people's fears and worries about the coronavirus. So if we just have a look at that, and then I will show you what the actual tells are. So here we are. As we said, the email address coming from the government, Daniel NHS at Pink Contracts. Do we believe that is true? Secondly, the law. They're trying to get you to click on a link so you get your £128 rebate. Oh, is that true? Probably not. And lastly, access your funds now. The big blue link there that you to click on, so that either you download their malware onto your system or they send you to a fake website to put in your details. Here we have another example. This is from the World Health Organization, or purporting to be from the World Health Organization. Can you see what is wrong with this email? Again, looking at the email address, do we believe that is genuine? This time they've put it in an attached document, not on a link. So that document will again contain the malware, or send you to a link, or send you somewhere where they'll get you to put in information. And lastly, they're playing on people's fears and worries at this terrible time at the moment. This little measure can save you. It's a threat. So now I'm going to play you a phishing call. We've talked about phishing, but it's very important to think that not just down the email route. Scams are still happening over the phone as well. And this is an example of a social engineering attack on a gentleman's mobile phone provider. And I'll play the video for you. So there we had an example of someone being put under time pressure and a little bit of social engineering, and that lady gave up all that gentleman's information. So it's very important that we don't just focus on phishing calls. We also think about scam phone calls as well. And next, I'm going to go on to smishing. Now, this is phishing, but via text. This was going away, but it's now starting to come back because of COVID-19. And what we have here is a text coming in, but unfortunately, there are no checks to verify that it's actually come from the UK government. So it could come from an attacker. And here we have the text. And more importantly, what we have in there is a link. And that link, again, like phishing, is either something that will download malware onto your system or send you onto a website where they will try and trick you into putting in personal information, such as financial information. So it's very important that we think about phishing, vishing, and smishing. So what should you do? Please use an official contact route, not the one that's suggesting. So if you're not sure whether that email is an official email or not, and you have your suspicions, please go down a route that you've used before, either a phone number or a website or something like that you've used before and you know it is the correct route. Please never, never click on the links, because this, as I've said, is where the malware is, or where they're trying to get you to send you to a fake website. Also, use the search engine to see if anyone's flagged up this email or text before. The internet has people out there that are looking out for you. So if you get an email and you're not sure, type in scam phishing email for that instance, the World Health Organization, and you will find on there that there is a lot of information, and there might even be a key bit of text that is exactly the same as yours, or the same phone number that they have phoned from. As an organization or an employer, agree and I will never list. And this could be that I will never contact you and ask you for financial information via email, or I will never get you to do this, I will never get you to do that. And that way, that negates a vast majority of the problems that you may get if you're sitting at home, working from home, and don't have contact with people. So, if in the unfortunate instance you are a victim of crime, please report it to Action Fraud. They're the National Reporting Centre, and they will triage your report and send it to the correct reporting authority, whether it be a local regional crime unit or local police force. And lastly, this is who we are. We are Cyber Griffin, City of London Police, and these are the exercises that we deliver both on webinar format and in physical format. So if you would like to contact us, please see our website there. And so that's me. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. We will now hear from Laura Hoff from CIPFA, who will discuss some simple financial controls your charity can put in place to minimise the risks of having staff and volunteers work remotely. Over to you, Laura.
Thank you very much, Zara, and thank you for inviting me to speak this morning. So in this next section, we'll be talking about financial controls and the added risks that increased home working can bring with them. We'll look at how that could leave your charity vulnerable to the risks of fraud, but also what you could do about it by thinking through your financial controls. Smaller charities can face particular challenges, as they may be relying on volunteers or a small number of core staff to deliver all elements of their services across the piece. To begin with, it's worth considering the increased risks that such emergency situations can bring that might increase our vulnerability to fraud. For example, there might be an increased urgency in your activities. So this could mean that you're having to make decisions more quickly and react at speed with a far greater number of people to help. This could mean there's less time to carry out your usual checks, which might cause you to click on a link or process a fraudulent invoice without thinking. Depending on the nature of your charity, you might need to work with new partners, donors, or suppliers. This could leave you vulnerable if you don't conduct the right due diligence and checks in advance. An increased number of beneficiaries. I mean, how will you deal with this with your current staffing levels? Will you need to recruit more staff and volunteers at speed? Like all organisations, you might be impacted by absences and sicknesses related to COVID-19. This might make it more difficult to ensure you keep on implementing your usual financial controls, and may mean that staff are moved to different and unfamiliar tasks, which could leave them vulnerable to fraud as they don't know what the normal process is that should be followed. There are a number of risks and challenges that come from increased levels of remote working. For example, ensuring IT security in the myriad of home offices that now form your organization. But I'll go on to that in more detail in the next slide. Before we move to that, I just wanted to touch upon the impact of financial hardship and uncertainty on increasing individuals' motivation to commit fraud. Using the well-known model of the fraud triangle that you can see there on the screen, the motivation to commit a fraud, whether out of financial hardship or maybe greed, is combined with a perceived opportunity, which might be there because of organizations being stretched in times of crisis. And then the final element of the triangle is that of rationalization, where individuals committing fraud convince themselves that they're not doing anything wrong, perhaps telling themselves that they're only doing what anyone else would do in the same circumstances. There are a number of challenges that come from working remotely that can increase your charity's vulnerability to fraud. For example, you need to consider what happens to your post and your deliveries if your premises are closed due to the virus. Is someone able to check the mail, which might contain checks or personal information or even invoices? What might happen to any assets you hold, such as computers or past donations, if your premises is left unattended? Are people still bringing cash donations to you? Where do these get kept if you can't leave them in the office? Are they at someone's house, for example? All of these areas require consideration to ensure you protect your charity. Another area to consider is how to monitor and provide oversight for the activities of your organization when you can't see what's happening. Is it possible to access your finance system remotely? Or does the person with access have to visit an unoccupied premises to manage the finances by themselves? How will you ensure that your data is kept secure if it's being accessed on a home computer, or with physical documents which are being accessed at home rather than in an office? In these times of change, it's essential to take a moment to think through how to adapt your policies and procedures in the new working environment, and to ensure that these are documented. It doesn't have to be a big, complicated process, but it's just important to think through any additional risks. Keep in mind the heightened risks that we've just discussed earlier, and also consider factors that can make smaller charities more vulnerable. For example, you might rely on goodwill and the support of employees and volunteers. This can lead to an assumption that everyone will act in the best interest of the charity and beneficiaries, which might lead to a more lax approach to financial controls due to this trust. The fact that small charities often lack resources, both in terms of time and people, means that all financial power might be put in one person's hand. This is risky because it makes it much easier for a fraudster to cover their tracks. There might also be a reliance on cash, which can be harder to track and easier to misappropriate and divert, especially in these current times of remote working and different ways of operating. A few specific risks could include the fraud risks that result from a data breach, whether this is intentional or accidental. Working remotely might mean that your cybersecurity isn't as good as it is in the office. Outside of the usual office environment, individuals may be more vulnerable to these phishing emails we were discussing earlier, or may just have weaker internet security at home. There's also a risk of data loss, again, whether that's negligent or deliberate, that might result from handling documents outside the office, whether these are financial data, personal data, or something else. Sometimes we forget that data also exists in a hard copy form and not just on a computer. When employees are working remotely, there can be an increased risk as well that credit cards are misused for their own personal expenditure, with the perception that they're not being monitored quite as much as usual. It can be much easier to order items for delivery to the home when they think nobody's watching. There's also a risk that remote working leads to breaches of the segregation of duties you might have in place, due to the challenges of ensuring several members of staff can review a document when they're not based in the same location. There's also a risk of simple misappropriation of assets, such as cash or deliveries that are left on the premises. This might be a trusted individual who knows where they're kept, for example, and takes advantage of this situation. So, from an external perspective, charities can be vulnerable to mandate fraud, and criminals will seek to take advantage of the current emergent situation to do this. Mandate fraud occurs when a fraudster gets you to change the bank account details of a known payment, maybe a subscription to a service or your payment to your supplier, to their own bank details. For example, this might be by sending an email or calling you to request bank account details should be changed. From an external perspective, you might be vulnerable to fraud within your procurement cycle or your supply chain. You should be particularly alert to the risks of product substitution. This is where substandard or sometimes dangerous products are substituted for genuine products. This could be particularly pertinent in the current situation if you're dealing with medical supplies, for example. If you need to work with new suppliers and partners as a result of the crisis, you should be alert to the risks of entirely fictitious companies entering the supply chain and ensure that you check any potential suppliers before you work with them. Charities can also be vulnerable to offers of help from apparently well-meaning individuals. If offers look too good to be true, then they quite often are. Be wary of giving access to your systems, premises, or data without carrying out the proper checks on an individual, even if they seem well-meaning and helpful. You could also be vulnerable to criminals taking advantage of the crisis to impersonate your suppliers, beneficiaries, or even your own staff, whether that's on the phone, using emails, or in person. You should also bear in mind that criminals might state they're connected to your charity just to get access to vulnerable people by pretending to be connected. So, having looked at some of the risks, how can you protect your charity then? Segregation of duties, which I mentioned earlier, are designed to ensure that no one individual has complete control over a financial task. This can be challenging for smaller organisations with limited personnel and resources. However, it's important to try to do this and continue to do so even in times of remote working. A few examples of segregation might include having dual authorisation, which you can set up online. It lets two people from the same business complete a third-party payment electronically. The way it works is that one person creates the payment request and then the other authorises the payment request, so no one individual has control over that process. The person who opens your post shouldn't also be taking it to the bank and filling out the deposit slip. More than one person needs to be involved in these type of financial processes to reduce the risk of collusion and fraud. Another example might be the processing of applications for support on a system and then validating that these applications are genuine. You'd want to segregate those tasks too. Reconciliations and spot checks, maybe such as bank account reconciliations or random checks on expenses, remain important even in times of crisis and remote working. If you can't do them right now because of the crisis, make sure they're still done as soon as is practical. Asset registers and logs of any stock you hold can be particularly important to keep a track of everything, especially when people are working remotely. If a staff or a volunteer have borrowed equipment from the office, it's important that you know where it is so that you can make sure you get it back when the time is right. Income and expenditure analysis should also be performed regularly. It sounds quite complicated, but it doesn't have to be. But it includes just checking what you usually spend and what usually comes into your charity and seeing if there are any unusual items. It's better to spot these sooner rather than later and check them out. So as I mentioned earlier, one of the key risks to charities in this situation, and always, can be that of mandate fraud. But there are a few simple measures you can put in place to protect your organisation. Don't take any request to change bank account details at face value. Always check. Make sure you use the contact details that you already have on your system, rather than the ones that have come through in an email or an invoice that you've just received. Don't reply to the email directly in case it's fraudulent. Start a new email chain with the email address that you already have on your system. When contacting the supplier or subscriber, whoever it is that's contacted you, make sure you use the contact details that you have for an approved person on your system to check that the request is genuine. If you're providing money or services to beneficiaries, consider how you can verify their identity in the current environment. Do you need to find a new way of doing this, maybe through using technology and seeing if they match the ID you've got on the system by a visual check? Given the increased risks that might come with remote working, making sure you check the credit card and bank account spend regularly to spot anything unusual as soon as you can will be very important. And also, it might be worth ensuring that you have approved delivery addresses logged with your suppliers to guard against items being delivered that are not for your charity's use or being delivered to other locations. So just to finish up then with a few key points to remember. Take some time to consider the additional risks for your charity that this situation might bring. It's important to try to be proactive and try to preempt the risks where you can. Make sure that you document any new or amended processes and procedures that you need to put in place to deal with this situation so that everyone's aware of them and you know what they are in the future if you look back. If something looks too good to be true, it probably is. Take the time to double check, especially for those offers of unsolicited help. Make sure that your staff and your volunteers are aware of the risks of fraud we face and have a way for them to raise concerns with you if they do have anything on their mind or if they've spotted something unusual. Finally, make sure that you keep complete financial records and document any decisions in writing. You will need these later, whether that's to investigate a case of fraud or for your usual financial processes. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Laura. Alan Bryce from the Charity Commission now joins us to explain how to report suspected fraud. Alan, over to you.
Thanks. As you've heard, by way of introduction, my name is Alan Bryce. I'm the Head of Development, Counter-Fraud and Cybercrime at the Charity Commission for England and Wales. And I'm going to cover the how, the when, and to whom of reporting fraud. From what we just heard there from Laura and from Ian about these COVID-19 themed scams being targeted against charities, I would argue that perhaps, in fact, almost certainly the most important thing that we can all do, and it comes at no cost, it's a bit of your time, but the most important thing that we can all do to help protect the entire charity sector from these frauds is reporting. And that's why I encourage all of you at your charities, if you're not sure, to report a fraud. And I'll be telling you who you should be reporting to, and most importantly, perhaps, when. So, it's the timely reporting of these scams, these frauds, these cyber attacks that we're seeing. It allows organisations such as ourselves at the Charity Commission and our colleagues in the police to identify new and emerging frauds. It's with this information that we gain from your reports of fraud that we can go on to provide warnings and alerts to charities. For example, you may have seen the recent regulatory alert that we at the Charity Commission published in April on COVID-19 scams specifically aimed at charities. It's these alerts that help raise awareness of the sort of frauds to look out for and, perhaps even more importantly, to point charities in the direction of more detailed guidance on specific types of scams that may be of most relevance to your own charity. But above all, to be effective, that reporting has to be timely. So if you have a concern and you're not sure whether to report it, my argument to you is go ahead and report it anyway. It's more important to have that information for organisations such as the Charity Commission and, of course, the police to be able to analyse that with other information to understand what is happening and how charities are being targeted. As I say, who should you report to? Well, of course, report to us at the Charity Commission through something called RSIs, Reporting Serious Incidents. I'm aware that some charities can often be unsure about whether or not an issue should be reported to us. My message to you, as I've just said there, is go ahead. If you're not sure, report it. There is extensive guidance now available on the Charity Commission website and even examples around the sort of frauds and cyber attacks and these types of scams that we're now seeing. There's extensive examples available to you to show you the sort of issues that we want to be reported. And of course, that reporting will depend, and the seriousness of those frauds will depend on the size and nature of your organisation. But there's also an aspect there that we can all pull together around, and that's that your charity may have been targeted by an unusual type of fraud or cyber attack that you prevented. I would still say that this is some information that you want to share with the Charity Commission and therefore wider with other charities, the way in which these scammers are attacking charities. Just make those serious incident reports to us, and we can use that to give wider alerts and wider warnings to all charities. And of course, you should also report to the police, to action fraud that we've heard about earlier from Ian. If the incident itself is a sort of cyber attack that's current or live, it's ongoing, don't just wait in terms of using the online reporting facility. There's also a call number, 0300 123 2040. It's on your screen now. That's 0300 123 2040, where if that cyber attack is live, as I say, use that number and you'll get further direct assistance. And in relation to those phishing scams that you heard Ian in particular talking about, and Laura as well was exploring some of the ways in which phishing is sadly on the rise across all sectors, but charities as well. The National Cybersecurity Centre earlier in April launched something called the Suspicious Email Reporting Service, or SARS. The timing of that could not be better. Charities and all organisations, as I say, have seen a massive increase in phishing attacks. So if you receive a suspicious email, you're not sure about it, you can then report through to National Cybersecurity Centre through these SARS in terms of raising concerns around it. So this is a great opportunity and a whole new facility that I would encourage you to use. And of course, not to forget those others that you may need to report depending on the circumstances. So clearly, for example, your bank, in many circumstances, depending on the nature of your charity, there may be other regulators that you should be reporting these frauds to. And of course, I would also say that in certain circumstances, depending on if your charity has grant funding, there's often a requirement by the funder that should there be a report, a fraud, actual or suspected in relation to the grant funding activity, that you should be reporting that fraud to the funder as well. In conclusion, I would say that above all, it's the timely reporting. As soon as you are aware, you should be reporting to the Charity Commission, to the police, and to other regulators, as I've been saying there, and other organisations. It's that timely reporting that can make the big difference. Don't wait, go ahead and report. Especially if you're not sure, go ahead and report. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. We hope that you have found this webinar useful, practical, and informative. If you have, please share it with your friends and colleagues. The more that we are aware of common frauds, the more we are likely to spot and stop them. Please remember to access the freely available resources listed under the resources section on your screen. If you would be interested in receiving a full online cybercrime briefing from the cyber briefing team at the City of London Police, please let us know. Finally, thank you to all of our guest speakers, and thank you to you for listening. Goodbye.